welcome to our third session of the second day of talks for this year's Dawn or Doom conference. We have David Whittinghill, who's an associate professor of computer graphics technology and computer and information technology here at Purdue University. Dr. Whittinghill's research focuses on gaming, virtual reality, simulation, and computer programming education, and how these technologies can more effectively address issues of health, education, and society. Dr. Whittinghill's leads projects in virtual reality, foreign language education, pediatric physical therapy, sustainable energy simulation, cancer care simulation, and games as a tool for improving educational outcomes. Dr. Whittinghill is also director of the Games Innovation Laboratory at gamesinnovation.org and the head of the Game Development Program in the Department of Computer Graphics Technology. Today he will give a talk titled Virtual Reality When Real Becomes Real. And so now we would ask you to silence your electronic devices, but please don't put them away. And we do encourage you to tweet with the hashtag Dawn or Doom and post to Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, or whatever social sites you prefer. And join me in welcoming Dr. David Whittinghill.
Thank you. Oh, wow. Thank you. Greetings. Thank you for coming. Today I'm going to talk about the technology of virtual reality, or VR as it's more commonly known. I know many of you, particularly y'all in the front because you're my students, you know what VR is, very familiar with it, but not everybody does. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to the technology and just kind of talk about it on a fundamental level. Okay, so VR is getting a lot of press these days, but it's not actually a new technology. Dreamers and sci-fi writers and futurists and VR researchers, we've been pining for this technology for a really long time. What is it? In sci-fi, it's been the creation of these magical virtual worlds which through science you get it into your eyes and your ears and you go into these worlds and you live them. And so it's been sort of a dream for a long time. I mean, the technology's been nascent for a while. So I've heard it said that it's a technology that's been 5 years away for like the last 25 years. Okay, well, it seems like those 5 years finally came, and that's with some breakthroughs in manufacturing where it could be done much cheaper, where in the past it'd be $30,000 to have a VR set, and just a minimal one at that. And now you can get it for $1,000 and put it in your home. So breakthroughs in manufacturing and some technical breakthroughs as well that have just made the technology better. So this is it. The party has started. But what is it? Okay, and Hollywood has portrayed it, as my students will attest, in a funny sort of way. Hollywood really sort of doesn't get it, but I think maybe The Matrix comes kind of close. And of course, we all want the holodeck, right? Even though we might make fun of it, don't tell me you don't want it, right? We all do. So this is what the tech could be. But I think what it actually is more like this, where there are simulations that kind of take you out of your own frame of reference and let you experience somebody else's frame of reference. There's up in the corner there's some research being done where you can find out what it's like to live in a wheelchair and the challenges that come with it. And a lot of these challenges you don't realize until you're living it, until you're experiencing it in the first person. Okay, so anyway, normally we think about VR as a, normally we think of VR as a purely visual experience, but in fact, we try to capture all the senses. So yes, visual, but also sound is really important. Touch, that's a whole other field called haptics, and that's very sophisticated, amazing stuff. Way over my head though. But yeah, haptics is really great. I've seen smell VR, and even they've tried taste VR before, but it's it doesn't really work very well, and it's kind of gross, and like, how do you taste it? You know, I guess there's not much appetite for taste VR. Ooh, see what I did? Okay, anyway, ultimately though, the goal is to simulate being a sensing human being and to do it in the computer space. All right, got my notes here, bear with me. So, at this point, I'd like to point out a related technology, augmented reality. Anybody heard of that? Probably most of you. Well, AR is the abbreviation for it. And what AR is, it's very similar to VR in that you're taking these virtual images and projecting them onto your visual field of view. But the big distinction is you can still see reality behind it. Whereas virtual reality completely replaces your reality and gives you a whole new reality, augmented reality keeps the old reality but adds to it, puts something on top of it. And you know, confession time here, AR is something that I personally have not been able to come up with something useful for it. Okay, I've been studying it for years, and I got to know the technology, and the only thing I could really think of to do was put captions over things in the real world, which is useful, okay, like a navigation app, finding the bus route or something like that. That's all good. That's about all my imagination is good for, though. I can't really go any farther. So I didn't have much use for it. Well, boy, was I wrong. I can't turn it down. Can you turn that down? Good Lord. Yeah, could we? I have more audio, and if it's that loud, we're going to kill people. So I don't want that. If you could turn that down for the next one. Anyway, what I was trying to show was a crowd of people, a big crowd of people. Ah, shit, I really want to show it. Who are in Central Park, and there's not just hundreds, but there's thousands of people converging on Central Park in New York City. And this is why they were there, because a Vaporeon had spawned in Central Park. Anybody know what that is? It's a big deal, right? And so everybody, swarmed on the park, and it was an event. So me and my limited imagination for AR was just, wrong. Okay, so I've seen the light. And it's pretty exciting because I was just checking the financials, and as of Friday, Pokemon Go, it launched in August, right? And as of Friday, 3-4 days ago, it's made $243 million. And of course, these kinds of things, they're a little bit trendy. They come and they go, but analysts really watch these things, and the analysts predict that by the time the wave has crested and it's over, $1.1 billion will be made off of this game within a year of its launch. So, wow, right? So, yeah, I'm in. Just tell me what to do. Anyway, though, so VR and AR, it's pretty clear they're going to be big players in the economy going forward. This market report from DigiCapital puts the projection at 2020. So we're, not even 5 years out. It's going to be a $120 billion market. Now, video games just broke $100 billion. Well, it just made $100 billion as a market over the summer. And us game developers were, yay, that's great. But it took us 30 years to get here. Okay, VR AR is projected to hit 120 within 5 years. So there's a lot of market potential here. Anyway, though, while all this market stuff, it's interesting and it's really exciting. That's not really what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about VR And I'm going to set aside AR for the time being, maybe next year. I'll talk about AR. But today I want to talk about VR and how it affects us personally, okay, how it, as individuals when we use it, and maybe even as a culture beyond that. So let's consider the fundamental experience. You take the headset, the very iconic headset, and you put it on, and now you can see nothing except what's in the simulation. Okay, your entire field of view, so the field of view is what you can see. Okay, basically, fancy word for what you can see. And your entire field of view is taken up. Now this is significant. It's a really important point. Okay, when objects in our field of view project onto the retina, the size of it makes a difference. Okay, so essentially when I look at something and the angle of my retina takes up 100 degrees, so that's roughly blue to blue on this field, our brain processes that information very differently than if it's a small angle. Okay, so let's consider this example. I don't even know if you can see that. Let's imagine we're on the ancient plains. This wouldn't be Africa because it's a tiger, but plains of Asia, and there's a tiger off in the distance, and it's taking up, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 degrees of our visual field of view, very small angle. What's our emotional response? Well, we're concerned because it is a tiger, after all, but we have our wits about us. We have time to react. Maybe we'll climb a tree. Bad idea if it's a tiger, but maybe we'll, hide in a cave or get a bunch of our friends together and we'll hit sticks and scare it away. But we can think, okay, we can react intelligently. Okay, now how would we react? All right, this angle gets a lot bigger and suddenly our brain activates in a very different way. All right, now we're not thinking, we're reacting. We're pumping up with adrenaline. We're pumping up with these deep neuronal processes. Okay, we're running, we're fighting. Okay, it's a different process. All right, in those processes, as VR people, we're counting on that. All right, that's what makes VR exciting, is it's tapping into a level of sensory perception that's much more salient, much more, I almost would say invasive. Okay, it's getting down deep. In essence, what's happening is you're not an observer of the event. When that field of view widens, you're not an observer anymore, you're a participant. And that changes the way your body reacts to that. In particular, these two critters here, the amygdala and the hippocampus, these are very old sections of the brain. They're you can almost say they're animalistic sections of the brain. And this is where learning happens. This is where memories are first processed. This is where fear is managed. And so it all goes through this part of the brain, which, again, is very old, very animalistic, if you will, and it's designed to keep you alive. All right? And things that you learn with a large field of view are you're going to remember them much better. I mean, and think about it. It makes a lot of sense from a survival standpoint. If you're out in the field and you see a tiger up close and you survive, afterwards it's going to be, note to self, I've got to remember how I did that because I'm alive. And whoever thought that would be possible, right? So yeah, these kinds of events, we're sort of wired to remember them deeply. It's in our survival best interest. So all of this fancy talk about the hippocampus and amygdala and VR, it actually comes down to this famous old proverb that Ben Franklin had of, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. So 2016, we've about caught up to Ben Franklin. So go us. That's good. All right. So this brings me to the first point I want to make. I'm sort of building a case here, like an attorney. So the first plank of my argument is that immersive experiences can create physiological responses in deeper learning. Okay, and this is not really up for debate. This is sort of established science. All right. I want to get this right. Okay. All right. And my next point is I want to talk about a pretty famous theory called the Twofactor theory of emotion. Anybody heard of that? Any psychologist, I'm sure, has. It's a pretty old theory. It was first published in 1962. It's also known as the Schachter-Singer theory of emotion. And what this is it makes the claim that emotions are really just cognitive labels that we slap onto some autonomic nervous experience. Okay, so for instance, I see a tiger. Let's continue with that. And I start getting, jumpy, and I'm nervous and everything. And my friend tells me, weren't you scared? Oh, that's what that's called? Fear? Scared? Okay. Yes, that's what that set of sensations means. It means fear. Okay, and so in the future, when I have those sensations, I'm going to call it fear. Okay, so here's another example. Let's say I'm going on a date with somebody, really excited about it, really nervous. Palms are sweaty. I want everything to go right. And this is pretty much me. But you're all nervous about it, and so you have all these sensations, and so then what you say to yourself, I must be in love. This is what love feels like. I've got butterflies. Butterflies means love. So we attach this label, but really it's led by the sensory experience first. Okay, or gosh, maybe it's lust. Okay, it doesn't have to be love. I don't know. I mean, it's not important what it is. The point is we attach a label to it, whatever that label happens to be, and then from that point forward, that's how we identify that emotion. Okay, and I know it sounds real clinical, not very romantic, but there's an awful lot of evidence that backs this up. Okay, another famous study about this is the suspension bridge study. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically the way it works is the experimenters got a group of men, split it in two groups, and they had the suspension bridge group and the sturdy bridge group. And they had the two groups of men walk across the bridge, not at the same time, but group one go across the suspension bridge, and when the person got to the other side, the experimenter, who was intentionally chosen to be an attractive female, came up and collected the data, like, oh, how did you feel on the bridge, and what was your experiences like? Tell us all about it. And that was all just a bunch of hooey. That wasn't really what the experiment was about, because then the experimenter said, at the end of it, okay, here's my phone number. If you have any questions about the experiment, give me a call. And so they repeated this for the suspension bridge, easy for me to say, suspension bridge group and the sturdy bridge group. And they found that by a large margin, the men from the suspension bridge group would call the woman for information and then ask her out. Okay, so that's sort of uncomfortable in a way, because we like to think of, oh, well, I like somebody because it's independent. It's me, the other person. I like them, and that's it. But it turns out you like them because you walked across a scary bridge. Okay, scary bridges are predictive of how in love you are with your spouse. Like, who knew, right? And there's a lot of research that backs this up. Okay. So this leads to my second point, is that physiological responses can create emotions. Okay, well, we label them as such, but to us, they're real. So that's my second point. All right. Lastly, I'd like you all to consider how emotions come into our decision-making process, into our reasoning process, and how ideas are formed. Okay, so we like to think of ourselves as rational beings, that we make our decisions based on the facts. We weigh the facts. This one, that one, okay, and there it is. The better one wins. When in fact, emotions are always part of our decision making. And in fact, we cannot remember anything without our emotions. We can't hang on to new memories without emotional input. Because it turns out, in studies with people with brain aphasias and like stroke victims and things like that, when they lose their ability to process emotions, they are no longer functional human beings. They can't decide to brush their teeth because there's this to consider and that to consider and this to consider. And there's always some other factual piece of information to consider. Eventually, you just have to brush your teeth. Okay, but they lose the ability to do that because you need the emotion to tip it one way or the other at the end of the day. And you also need that emotion to call things back. Okay, so it turns out emotion is not just this cognitive add-on that sort of gives our lives color and flavor and passion and meaning. It turns out emotion is part and parcel to our reasoning process. We cannot reason without our emotion. Okay? So, my third point. Emotions create beliefs, create knowledge, create behavior. So here's my 3 points that I present to the jury. Okay? So this means sensory experience, immersion, can lead to a physiological response, which can lead to knowledge and behavior. Taken another way, we know virtual reality can create immersion, which creates physiological response, which creates knowledge and behavior. Therefore, my little bit of syllogistic reasoning, virtual reality can create knowledge, beliefs, and behavior. And this is pretty well documented. It's not a really controversial statement I'm making necessarily. I wanted to walk you through that process and just a little bit of the science of why this is so. So I'm not coming up here and you have to take it on faith and I'm saying, well, virtual reality is great because it can do all these great things. And so I just wanted to walk you into why, the inferences that led to that. Okay, so any questions about the science before I get into some examples? If you have any questions, just come up to the microphone and I'll cover them. Okay, I want to talk about a little bit of what I think is some really exciting work in VR. Okay, this is the Dawn or Doom conference, right? So we're going to talk about some good stuff and we'll talk about some bad stuff. So I want to talk about some good stuff that I think is pretty exciting. So this is Noni de la Peña, and she is a pioneer in immersive journalism. Anybody heard of immersive journalism? Immersive journalism, essentially what she has started, and she, as far as I can tell, she's the first. It's where instead of, let's say there's a news story, breaking news, there's a storm out there, there's a hurricane, and then the CNN sends the reporter down to the storm with her microphone, and she's getting blown and battered around and everything, and she says, it's a heck of a storm, and there's crazy things happening, and I'm all wet, and all that. But the reporter is telling you her narrative, okay? She's interpreting these events, and as humans, we're very sensitive to narrative. Narrative stories, we're just born storytellers and story listeners. And so you're weaving in a story, and it's innocuous enough. It's a storm, big deal, right? Well, what Noni does is when she covers the story, she goes and collects primary sources at the scene. So gathering up cell phone video footage, gathering as much audio as possible, witness testimonials, maps, all this stuff about where the news event happened, and then takes it back to her lab and builds a VR simulation. Okay, and then you go, then as the viewer, instead of watching the news, you're experiencing these events. And I've experienced, notice my phrasing, it's not, I didn't watch, I experienced some of her coverage, and it's amazing. I mean, it really sticks with you. I saw the one that was Hunger in LA, and that was pretty intense because it was people waiting in line at a food bank for food, and one person went into a diabetic seizures, and so there was audio of the whole event, and I have the VR headset and I'm watching the person fall to the ground and convulsing and everything, and experiencing it versus reading a story about man collapsed when went into diabetic coma. Very different experiences. And so she also had something about Syria and just kind of like life on the ground and how harrowing it can be there. And another one that I experienced was where there was a shooting at the U.S.-Mexico border, a border patrol issue that came up, and somebody got shot. And so she doesn't try to say, this is what you need to think about it. This is the right interpretation. Here's the narrative I'm weaving for you. She just gathers up as much primary source material as she can and builds it and lets you experience it. And so the story kind of tells itself after that. And it's pretty amazing stuff. It really sticks with you. Okay. Another great piece of work is Hoffman and Patterson over at University of Seattle. And then I want to make sure I get this right. We'll have Washington, Seattle, and the UW Harborview Burn Center nearby. So they have this partnership. What they do is, of course, the burn center, so they treat people with burns. And as it turns out, as bad as it is to get burned, badly burned, as painful as that is, making it worse is, so you have to get your wounds bandaged, and that is really painful to have your bandages changed. But that's a part of the process. As you get better, the bandages have to get cut off and put back on. And so people who have had it done rate the pain from intense to excruciating. Nothing less than intense. Okay, so it's bad stuff. So what Hoffman does here is they have a VR simulation called Snow World. And this guy is viewing Snow World right now, and it's polar bears and snowmen and icy rivers and snow falling from the sky, all this imagery of cold. And they found that it helps quite a bit in reducing the pain. I mean, they still need opioids. It's not a cure, but it lowers that reported pain threshold. And it does it with just wearing the headset. So that's pretty exciting. You can see where that could go in terms of treating all kinds of wounds, right? And if we had all day, I could go and tell you about one after another after another. There's just really wonderful, human-centered stuff going on here. But we don't have all day. And so the theme of this conference, of course, is like a futurist sort of thing, right? So I'll give you a little bit of the now, and then we'll extrapolate it into the future. And so now I'm going to get into some more raw speculation here, okay? But it's informed speculation, okay? So take it with a grain of salt, but I think it should be an interesting journey. So, okay, we got dawn and we got doom. I'm going to start with some doom. Okay, I'm going to start with a bad one. I don't know if you know who these people are. They've been in the news lately, though. So apparently these two people had a debate recently, and so the media people, all the voices in the media and just out there, discussed how they think it went. All right, so one person said Donald very much had the upper hand over Hillary. Okay. Another person said she was smart, strong, and presidential. So these are both positive statements. Another one said, I thought Donald had the strongest debate performance he's had in this election cycle. That's pretty high praise. But then somebody else said, probably the greatest debater in public speaking in politics in our lifetime. Wow, very excited. Okay, here's a negative one. Thought I was watching a dumpster fire. And a negative one. Have you ever seen a greater embarrassment to our country? Okay, so clearly not all of these are true. They can't be. You know, there are these contradictory statements. Trump can't have won and Hillary can't have also won. I mean, there's an objective reality here that these people are unaware of, okay? And I don't even want to talk politics. I don't want to go into that. That's not where I'm going with this. What I'm trying to point out is that these comments here, the people who have this reality, it's real to them. Okay, it's not perception. When I talk about objective reality, this is objective reality. Okay, that's sort of the mind-blowing moment. And I hope this thing is not blaring again, because. What? Okay, is your mind blown? All right. I'm trying to make the point that subjective reality is objective reality to each of us. And that's a significant point here. So there's a concept called the epistemological bubble. Anybody heard of that? It's a little esoteric. Epistemology it's a philosophical term, and it has to do with how we learn the things we know. There's a whole branch of philosophy that's all about how we learn the things we know. All right. So the epistemological bubble is when everything we know comes from this bubble, and everything in that bubble has been carefully curated to agree with our certain preconceived perception, okay? And it becomes very self-referential, all right? So we say, well, this is true because Bob said it's true. Well, how does Bob know? Well, Bob knows because Tom said it's true. Well, how does Tom know it's true? Well, Bob said it's true. And there it is. And so you're trapped in this bubble that's referring to itself. But again, I just want to stress, you create your own epistemological reality. It changes the way you actually see the world. Now, this comes from a field of view maybe 10 degrees across. As we look at our phones, it's very small. We look at our TVs. Okay, we look at these media devices in our lives, and it subtends a very small angle across our retina. But look at the kind of realities that we can create with it, with 10 degrees of the retina. Okay, now consider when you can take 100 degrees of the retina, and you add in all of the sensory arousal that goes with that, and all of the emotional shaping, and all of the beliefs and knowledge shaping. And you get to see that this technology can be really persuasive. So okay, you could say, well, turn it off, turn that crap off then. Okay, well, what if you can't? Okay, what if you live in North Korea, where you have to listen to the radio for hours every day and hear all about the great leader and all the propaganda? You're not allowed to turn it off. I mean, here the way we do it, we just put it on cable news and the radio, and we willfully listen to the propaganda, But there they have to, right? But what if you can't turn it off? I mean, the degree of control you could have over a person's thinking could be extraordinary. Okay, so a good one now. You may recognize this from Emily Dreyfus's talk. Like probably many of you, I travel a lot, and that's hard, right? You're going away from your family, and you miss everybody, and they miss you. And so what Emily did is she put herself, this little robot with her on an iPad, as kind of her avatar, if you will, but a physical avatar, a proxy for her that existed physically in this space while she was elsewhere. Okay, so what if we did this in VR? What if we all went and had ourselves laser scanned, you have this recreation of ourselves, and maybe chop off a few pounds while we're at it, and just look the way our family expects us to, our significant others expect us to, and we have this interaction. The science tells us that's going to be pretty persuasive. That's the social needs we have are probably going to be met by that. Okay, so think of how this could help people who travel a lot. So like, I don't know, business travelers, soldiers, salespersons, lonely middle-aged computer graphics professors. I mean, just anybody really. Okay, I want to show you a great movie, but it's really loud. Is there anything we can do to just drop this volume a little bit? Help me out here. It's no, because when I hit the volume, it just says no. Okay. All right, we'll see how it goes. So this is a movie, a short film by Federico Heller called Uncanny Valley. And I'm going to skip the first part of the movie. It's basically two parts. You have the first part of the movie, which is all of these people who are like VR addicts, and they're living in this flop house, like a drug house or something, and they can't function in society because they're just hooked on VR. And instead of the headsets, they have like a nose ring kind of thing. It's sci-fi, you can do that. But that's how they live in the virtual world. They can't function otherwise. Myself, I'm not as worried about that. I'm more worried about what happens in the second half of the movie, within the game that these people are playing. And they're playing a VR game where you're a soldier and you're shooting all these bug-eyed aliens and everything. And they're really into it. So I'm going to show you just a snippet of this movie to capture that. Again, sorry, it's going to be loud. Here's the guy experiencing it.
offline, it's too slow.
Nothing happens. It's too quiet, boring.
It's lonely.
It's depressing. I don't like it.
I want it to be as intense as possible. As real as possible.
Attention, there's a ghost train 4 minutes from your location. Be very far frontal. Assault on your ammunition ready.
All right. So I know that's pretty dark stuff, so I'm going to end on a good note. But, I don't know. That one hits me because it's just not that far out of the realm of possibility. Okay, all you need, internet gaming. Do we have internet gaming? Yeah. Drone technology. Do we have drone technology? Yeah. We don't have bipedal robots. I mean, we have the big old Boston Dynamic things, but it won't be much longer until we've got that nailed down. In fact, I've been told that some of the drone pilots even use Xbox controllers, right? So this is not really impossible. I mean, if you were playing a multiplayer game, how would you know that it isn't real? Okay? If your reality was substituted, you would have no way of knowing. Your epistemological bubble would be complete. It would be perfect, and you'd have no way of knowing. So anyway, there's the doom. And I want to end on some dawn. Okay, so I think there's a lot of good we can do with this technology. That we talked about education, reaching kids that might have attentional disorders, that we can get to them in a different way. We can create deeper learning that's longer lasting. We can work with people who are traumatized or have phobias, PTSD, to help maybe overcome some of that deep learning that was bad and start to overwrite it. Imagine visiting Pluto, walking around on Pluto. If we land a probe there, or in the oceans of Europa or Mars, where the rover goes, we go physically. I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff. So I just would putting the call out, like, great stuff, but as we go forward, let's make sure we have our better angels behind the wheel rather than the other way. Okay? Lastly, if you want to try out some of this technology, the Envision Center, it's just right down on the ground level. You can try AR, you can try VR, you can try all this stuff. And the dawn I spoke of, it's all down there. So you can try it out and see for yourself. Exciting stuff. Thank you. Yes?
Thank you for the interesting talk. I actually tried out the Envision Center. It's really interesting to go there. So the graphics are it's not like a real wall. They're clearly kind of like cartoonish.
Right.
And so I was moving myself into, basically a walkway. I pushed the button a little too fast, and I ran into the wall, which was really interesting because my entire body felt cognitive pain.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking it hurts, but it doesn't because I didn't physically hit anything. But
Right.
I actually reacted. I put my hands up and tore off the visor. Yes. And so I was wondering, if we had stronger images, if it was more realistic, would I actually feel pain?
Like a phantom pain?
Yeah.
I would estimate, just for a moment, it would take you a moment to sort it out. But I've seen people using these applications go, ow! When things happen. Why would you say ow? Nothing touched you, right? But there's a bit of disconnect at first while your sensory system tries to figure out that it received the visual input of pain, but it didn't have the pair up. This is actually why people get motion sick. It's because you get the visual input of motion, but you're not moving. Now, unless you are moving, then it's great. But if you're sitting down and the VR tells you you're walking through someplace, you'll get really sick because it's that disconnect.
So, quick follow-up. So, as given the sort of situation, it can be quite dangerous.
Yes.
Unless there are fail-safes. So I was wondering if there are ethics involved in virtual reality, just like for self-driving car issues.
Nothing. and it's one of the reasons I wanted to talk today. Is it's a conversation I think we need to have. Particularly the previous speaker talking about trolls and hackers. What if you hacked into somebody's VR and had demons show up or something, scared the hell out of somebody at this deep level? I mean, that could be very serious. You could traumatize somebody like that. Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, I know. I work with a guy whose brother has a virtual reality set, and he was telling us about it. And my first thought was, because I work in the medical field, we got a lot of drug addicts out there that are going after drugs because of the sensory highs.
Mm.
And I can see that happening with this. You just get so many sensory overloads that you could become addicted to wanting to play this all the time. And, I kind of look at the future generations as, are they just going to be so into all these things that are false and stimulating their senses and giving them such pleasure or adrenaline rushes that they just leave real life and social connections with other people off to the side and just become these virtual reality couch potato things? And then who's going to support them? Because they're so into this crap, they're like the junkies that can't get a job because they're high on heroin.
They're going to farm gold on World of Warcraft.
How do you say this is for entertainment value, but you have a real life over here when you've got all these sensory highs coming in because of all the senses being overloaded?
Yeah, I think it's a real issue. If you're seeing it already with, I'm sure like when we were growing up, you turn 16, 17, car. I need a car. I want a car. Dad, can I have a car? I have a car.
Yeah.
Most millennials don't really care. Any millennials back me up on this at all? It's not as important, whereas it was paramount in my generation. And it's because so much of their social needs are met by staying online. They don't need to go to the mall or wherever. They've got it at every moment.
And they don't need to be active. And so from a medical standpoint, their physical functions or keeping in better health are going down because, well, look at the Wii's. I've got nieces and nephews that bowl and play tennis in the bedroom in front of a Wii, and it's like my brain is saying, get your ass out on the tennis court.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. And now I get home, I tell my husband they need to get their ass outside. This is nuts, and I won't let my grandchildren watch TV or do that crap.
Yeah.
We go do it. So I guess it's just less people on my mountain.
And it'll be interesting to see how society
But it's
changes
scary.
around that.
It is really scary from a lot of viewpoints.
Well, if it's any consolation, it won't be our society, right? Our cohort. They'll all be happily immersed in it.
Yeah.
We'll be on the outside.
But who takes care of all the people that are happily immersed?
Well, that's the big question. Yeah. How do you maintain a productive life?
He's got it, robots. Everyone will have their robot.
Yes, thank you.
I kind of have two questions. One is when there was the burn victims.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a study or was that just an experiment of sorts or?
It's an ongoing set of
Okay.
experiments.
Did they do audio or was it completely visual?
Audio too.
Okay.
Well, at least they are now. When it first started off, it was just visual.
Okay.
But now they've got the winds blowing and.
Okay. Is that showing better results right now or?
I have not seen the data.
Is it too early? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I actually talked to the lead author or the lead scientist yesterday about this, and I wish I had that question because I'm curious about it too.
Yeah. So, kind of going off of what she said, do you think that there should be more legal, like, should it be a little bit more regulated, considering how if we don't, like, nip it in the bud now, it'll just get out of hand? Or, like, because it can go down.
It can go bad.
Yeah, really quick.
Yeah, I
You know?
mean, for instance, there was a simulation that was done, and this is good, but it represents something bad. And what it was is a simulation of what it's like to be sexually assaulted, a VR simulation. And you can imagine how intense that is, but the point of it, it was, by a woman who that's her, area of advocacy, and to make people understand just how terrible it is by experiencing it. Well, what if somebody didn't have good motives? You wanted to do something along those lines to somebody. But I don't know if regulation's the answer or not. Some say that no, they'll just find another way around it. But on the other hand, they said the same thing about digital music being shared and things like that, but now the Pirates Bay is dead, so I don't know. I don't really know the answer, but I do know that it's something we shouldn't take for granted, and we should really keep our eye on it. Thank you.
Hi, I had a quick question just about, on a brighter side, I guess.
Yes.
You mentioned PTSD.
I'd like that.
You mentioned like PTSD.
Yes.
And I was thinking there has to be other like medical treatments, maybe like stress relief. Do you think
Uh-huh.
doctors will be able to like prescribe VR software to patients?
I think it's inevitable.
That is going to happen?
Yeah.
How soon do you think it will happen?
It's already happening with phobia treatment. It's what they do. There's a technique called systematic desensitization, which is very old. It's been done in behavior therapy for years. But now we're starting to see it in VR, and it's turning out to be really effective. So I think they're going to be at the vanguard with phobia treatment, and then I expect it'll, in the next just 2 years, we're going to see it go beyond that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I had a question about, in your opinion, what do you think VR would do to enhance people's ability to empathize with others? So you had that example about being in LA and kind of seeing that experience firsthand of like, what is someone dealing with hunger? What is their life like?
Yeah.
Opposing side of that, do you think being engaged in something like virtual reality could disengage you from the actual reality?
That's a great question. My own bias is I think it's going to build empathy if it's used wisely. I actually have, I really don't want to say specifics on it, but I have a grant proposal out and I'm waiting to hear back on it, but it's on that premise that we can build empathy by building these experiences. So if I were a betting man, I would bet yes, that it's going to have a net positive toward empathy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bill.
Yeah, so hi. I actually got interested in VR right around when Vive showed up. I followed some like anime, for example, it's a very popular subject there. So a lot of them used what the short film used, a kind of brain-computer interface.
Yeah.
Because for me, just putting on a headset and still using like a keyboard and mouse just kind of broke the immersive effect, but being able to move around was like huge.
Those Vive controllers make a giant difference.
Oh yeah. And my question about that is like, do you have any idea about a timetable for that kind of VR? Or perhaps if not, how influential will that be towards the dawn and doom aspect compared to traditional VR?
Timetable, it's tough to say. NVIDIA did some amazing work recently on this, and there have been breakthroughs in foveated rendering, which puts a lot of detail just where your fovea is, your sweet visual spot, and it lowers it where you can't really see it, and that frees up resources for other aspects of the simulation for greater fidelity. The real problem is motion sickness, simulator sickness, and that is a really tough nut because what happens is our visual system sees movement, our vestibular system does not experience movement, And so at present, all the VR simulations, you sit in one place and you look around. You kind of rotate because you've got good synchronization between eyes and ears. As soon as you start walking, we call it vectioning, as soon as you start vectioning, people start to get sick. And it's a real fundamental problem. How do you trick the vestibular system into syncing up with the visual? And without that, I don't know if we're going to just bypass it entirely, bypass the vestibular system and put some electrodes back here. I don't know what the solution's going to be. If they crack that, that'll be the first step toward brain interfaces, though. But it's a black box at the moment. Thank you. Yes.
My question kind of comes from a little more of a literary standpoint, sort of like with Neil Stephenson's books, Snow Crash and The Diamond Age.
Sure.
Both very good. I actually enjoy Diamond Age a little bit more because it goes into more AR, following around this little girl and teaching her through a book sort of thing, sort of augmenting her reality. So how far do you think we're kind of away from that sort of thing? Because hers is a little more specialized because they actually would hire an actor to perform and be a teacher.
Yeah.
Teleprompter.
5 years.
About 5 years?
Tops. I mean, this is futurism, so I can do that, right? But yeah, I'd say there's just so much energy and money being spent in this area, and like Snow Crash and William Gibson stuff has so inspired the people who are making this technology. They want it more than anybody. That's why people had a lot of suspicion about Zuckerberg. Is that his Zuckerberg? Whatever, the Facebook guy. Buying Oculus. He just wants it for ads. Well, I don't think he just wants it for ads. He's a geek just like the rest of us. He wants Snow Crash just like the rest of us. And he saw that what VR needed was big investment. I think his investment of $2 billion, if VR makes it, that's when it made it, at that moment that he bought in so big, because now everybody else could buy in, and we're going to see these add-on effects. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we all want it very badly.
So I guess following with Snow Crash, I had a little bit of a second question. How much do you think there is the danger of the fictional drug in there called Snow Crash kind of happening, these sort of bright colors and sort of things that kind of reprogram the brain a little bit?
I mean, that's a little bit of what I was going for in this talk. That's the Snow Crash hack, if you will. So I think it's a real possibility, but I don't know. I mean, I still think it's on the fringe. Thank you. All right. Thank you.